Relationships in life are one of the main determinants of our mental health. The best leaders are the leaders who champion people, are secure enough in themselves to not have to push anyone else down. Supporting people to feel like they're not so on their own, that is life-saving. Mental health and emotional well-being, when they're bad, they're bad.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of the podcast in partnership with the Megaverse. Meet Dr Radha Modgil, the Wellbeing guru since 2008. She's not your regular NHS GP. She's also a TV, radio and podcast superstar, spreading good vibes around the world. Dr Radha believes we all have our secret stash of wellbeing magic, and she's here to uncover it, connecting us all in our quest for genuine wellbeing. From BBC Radio 1's Life's Hacks to CBB's Feeling Better, her energy and creativity shines across all platforms. A columnist for The Independent and the newspaper, she shares tips on living our best lives. Dr Radha's mental health commitment extends to monthly columns for Psychology's magazine and BBC Science Focus magazine. Get ready for a hangout with Dr Radha, your go-to for positive vibes and a masterclass on living life to the fullest. Cue the music.
Megaverse, the digital frontier of tomorrow. Megaverse stands at the cutting-edge intersection of technology and imagination. It's a virtual realm where the limitless expanse of the digital universe unfolds, offering users unparalleled experiences and interactions. With its advanced metaverse platform, users can craft unique avatars, forge connections, and even establish their own digital estates. It's more than just virtual reality. Megaverse is an expansive digital civilization teeming with opportunities for both individuals and brands. From immersive concerts to revolutionary retail experiences, Megaverse is redefining the way we engage with the digital world. As we stand on the brink of a new era where the lines between our physical reality and the digital realm blur, Megaverse is poised to lead the charge in this brave new world. Dive in and discover a universe without bounds. This really is the future. Radha, thank you so much for coming to join us on the podcast today.
Honestly, it's a real pleasure. I've already enjoyed the first 10 minutes just chatting to you before. So that even if it was just that, I'd be happy just to go now because I've learned a lot from you already in 10 minutes.
Okay, that's a wrap. It's all over. It's done.
It's all finished. It's all gone. Yeah.
You've done a few podcasts before, but what I want you to do first of all is just to describe your professional qualifications for everybody so that they can understand that any point of view or opinion you have at least comes from a well thought out place.
Fingers crossed, yeah. So I am a medical doctor. I work in the NHS. I did about 6 or 7 years of hospital medicine. I then moved into primary care, so general practice, and then did that full time for maybe sort of 4 or 5 years, and then really thought to myself, I'm really missing out a little bit more on creativity, on teamwork, on how I can use my expertise in terms of health and well-being. And so how else can I use that? What other roles can I look for that still allow me to kind of communicate and to support people with their health and well-being, but just in a different way? So I then went off, cast my net wide and thought, what can I do? And landed up doing a lot of broadcasting work. So I've been a broadcaster on sort of TV and radio since 2008. I've written a lot. I'm an author. I've got involved a lot in different campaigns, public health campaigns. Basically, my remit is if there's something that inspires me and something that I feel is worthwhile doing, or likewise something that I feel people aren't talking about but needs to be talked about, then I will go and do it. That will be a yes from me. So yeah, lots of different remits. I have 4 or 5 different jobs, like I say, all in the health and wellbeing space, but very much in different contexts of how that affects people, impacts people, and very, very interested in how, I suppose, my real big passion is how. So we read lots of articles about health and wellbeing. We read about the theory of what we should do, but always at the end of those articles, I'm like, and now what? How do I do that? So I'm all about the how. I'm all about kind of supporting people to work out actually in this moment, what do you do? How do you take that advice and make it into something tangible and practical and something you can see? But also I think we're really backward at integrating our life events or what happens in life, like financial issues, relationship breakdown, grief, for example, all of those things. How do we kind of integrate that and those events into our health and well-being? And I think at the moment, life seems to be very separate from the conversation around health and well-being.
Okay, let's go back to this event that people keep regurgitating over and over again since it happened 3 years ago, and seem to want to use Corona, COVID, lockdown as the reason that everything has changed. Now, some things changed for me, but I fundamentally didn't change as a human being. And I'm not sure that everybody or most people really fundamentally change as a human being. But from what I've learned, this whole kind of like working from home approach has been something that's really kind of like dug itself in and become part of everyday life for lots and lots of people in business, where employees are now demanding. Okay, even though they might have signed a contract to work 9 to 5, 5 days a week,
Yes.
demanding the freedom or the ability or the flexibility to be able to work from home and do some of their job that way.
Yes.
When we look at that and we look at that shift that's taken place, do you think working from home is healthy?
So I think with anything, nothing is ever 100% healthy or 100% unhealthy. Unfortunately, it is that old remit of it's a balance. And I think it is a balance. I think, however, at the moment, the conversation is a little bit too skewed over to the side of working from home is much better for you. And I think we've forgotten about the benefits of work. So I think before COVID, before the pandemic, it was probably skewed a little bit too much in the sense of you have to be at work all the time, not necessarily a lot of conversation or acknowledgement of people's personal lives and how that impacts them at work. But now that pendulum, I think, has swung way too much over the other side. And now actually the conversation is literally like, this is really good for you. You should all be working from home. It's much better for you than being forced to go into work. And we need to remember the benefits of work. So I do a lot around work-life balance and kind of how we frame things. And the silly thing is that we look at work and life as two opposing forces. We look at them as enemies. If you're talking about a sort of a fairy tale or a narrative, it's the good and the bad. That is always going to cause conflict and tension if we frame it in that manner. What we have to do is look at it and say, actually, there's no good and no bad. They just are. How can we allow them to coexist in parallel with each other? And if there are any conflicts, how can we actually sort them out in a fashion where they're coming together rather than tearing each other apart? Because if we look at them as separate, we're always going to be conflicted and we're always going to be feeling like we're missing out on something, no matter which side of the divide we're on at that particular time. So what are the benefits of work? Loads of benefits. Purpose, routine, structure, connection, social bonding, self-esteem, confidence, the exchange of ideas, solution finding, physical health in terms of actually traveling into your place of work, for example. So there are just so many benefits to actually being physically in a workplace. And like I say, there are also benefits to working from home in terms of if you've got caring responsibilities, it's tricky for you at home. You can do other sort of bits and pieces, life admin, all that kind of stuff. But we really do need to remember actually work is good for us and it's good for us in lots of ways. And we see the converse of that when people lose their jobs or they're out of work or they can't go to work because of health issues or whatever else might be going on for them. You do see a deterioration in confidence and self-esteem and social connection and progression of ideas. So in answer to your question, we can't be in favour of the pendulum being one extreme or the other. We have to have this conversation in nuance and we have to have a balanced conversation. But we do also need to shout about the benefits of being at work in that environment, as well as talking about people's personal lives and kind of create that conversation to be a bit more realistic, I think.
And then you add into the equation people working from home without having the facility to do so, and extra stress on a marriage or a family because somebody's, asking for everyone to be quiet while they're sat at the dining table and working.
Yes.
And then you take people that, from the other side, you take people that go to work because they have to and they don't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Versus the people that go to work that thrive and, they love what they do. They find great sense of purpose and mission in it rather than just making some money. So you bring all of those things onto the table. What then becomes an interesting conversation for me is how leaders lead that. You know, we look at businesses and, you know, an enormous amount of pressure on people that are in charge of whether it's teams or large groups or even companies, how they find a way to navigate through that kind of stuff. You know, where do they start?
Yeah, well, that is tricky, like you say, because what I just spoke about was from the employee sort of point of view, wasn't it? But like you say, if you're the employer or a leader in that organisation, how do you manage people remotely? How do you bring them together? How do you get the best out of them? How do you also really know what's happening for them in their personal lives? Because, you know, on a screen, you don't have those water cooler moments, do you, where you open up a conversation, or you might read someone's body language or their tone has slightly changed and you ask them the question, are you okay? Is everything all right? So I think as leaders, it's extremely, extremely challenging, not just in terms of how you navigate the employees' kind of health, well-being and productivity and teamwork, but also how you manage your own stress, because leaders have a lot of stress and they need to find effective ways to manage that stress, to debrief from that stress, to feel like they're getting somewhere. Otherwise, their stress is going to be projected onto their teams and vice versa. And without a leader, your whole organisation falls down without that cohesion. So I think it is very, very challenging for them. I think it's a matter of actually working on, I suppose, relationships, having those interpersonal conversations a bit more with your employees or members of your team. I think also, to a certain degree, actually having some rules and ideas around how many times people have to meet up as a team. And even if people don't necessarily want that, almost kind of seeing that as being slightly cruel to be kind, because actually that brings cohesion. So having sort of boundaries and firm ideas around that, and everyone knowing where they stand in that team. But also I think to collaborate, to talk, to debrief with other leaders. You know, you need peer support. If you're leading a group of people, you need to know how other people are feeling, that you're not alone in these challenges, and work out solutions for it. But it's not easy. It's not easy for people to bring people together and to know what's going on for them personally, so you can get the best out of them in terms of productivity for your business.
I liken it to somebody who's a tenant and renting a property, who can't afford to pay the rent, hating on the landlord for demanding the rent, and having no understanding that the landlord has got the mortgage to pay himself, and the rent that he's collecting on that property pays the mortgage. And if the tenant doesn't pay the mortgage, then he doesn't pay the rent, then he can't pay the mortgage.
Yes.
Yet the tenant's like, you're out of order, putting me under this pressure. It's like, pardon? You know, I've got that pressure myself. And you think about with business owners, it's that the employees have their demands, but do they have any understanding about what it must be like to own a business and take all of that responsibility on? You know, making sure that everybody gets paid on time, making sure the VAT's paid, the taxes paid, the books are up to date, making sure there's enough clients in the business, as well as then taking on the responsibility of making sure everyone's happy.
Yes,
you know,
it's a lot.
It's
more actually than you would do for if you had children, isn't it? Because you're kind of almost taking on all of those aspects and dealing with all of their issues as well. And I think that's why it's so important in any business or organisation, or any way where you've got a team of people. It's really important for people to exchange roles, for people to actually try to, I know you can never completely recreate that experience, but, you know, in order for people to have empathy and understanding of the challenges that leaders face and vice versa, I do think people need to swap roles sometimes, just for a day or just for half a day even, to try and understand and see the kind of pressures and experience that other person has. Because without that understanding and tolerance and empathy, you know, you don't have a very cohesive team. If people really understood what you went through, they might be a little bit more like, oh, okay, this is quite challenging, this is quite hard, and vice versa. So I'm a big fan of the idea of CEOs kind of, you know, sort of swapping with an employee in a smaller team to see actually what their experience is and how they understand each other, because that improves relationships in terms of a business. It improves productivity, empathy, understanding, and actually also just how everything works. You know, a business is a bit like a piece of machinery. There are all these little cogs. And in order to understand how to lead that organisation or how to work in it, you need to understand how all of those different pieces fit in. And although we know the theory is very different from the practical bits and actually seeing it and experiencing it. So I think that's a really interesting idea. I also think, I mean, I've always had this image of and this idea for a TV show, which I'd love to do, where you would go into different workplaces, different work environments, and you'd go and do a whole reset, a whole like looking at the business, looking at the teamwork, looking at the individuals, their personal challenges, their personal issues in terms of health, well-being, how the teams are running, and you do a complete and utter sort of reset, and you tackle all of these issues and challenges at the different levels, and look at the interactions between all the different people, and then finally, hopefully at the end of that, you'd see a business that was working much better, an organisation that was healthier, happier. I think that'd be a fascinating thing to do, and in all the different work environments, because work is such a different place, isn't it? Everyone has a different experience of work, the environment, the physical environment, the hours. I mean, it's a fascinating thing, and it takes up so much of our lives. The number of hours we are at work is huge. So why we don't put more resource and interest and skill into this area is a little bit of a mystery to me, to be honest with you.
When you say what you're saying, it makes me think of something that's discussed outside of the workplace, okay, quite commonly, which is gratitude and kindness. And it's like, let's be kind. Okay, let's be grateful for what we have. And we think about it as individuals in everyday parts of our lives. But when have we thought about applying that to our employer or our employee? You know, how can I be really kind to this person? How grateful am I that person decided to choose this company as the company to work, and vice versa? How grateful am I that the company chose me to work for them?
Yes.
You know, imagine if you got up every day being grateful for the fact that you had the chance to develop your career, evolve and grow, and you had the chance to be kind to others, because kindness to me is all about how it makes you feel.
Oh,
you know?
100%.
If I'm really kind to you, it makes me feel good, you know? I get the win. Of course, you get the win as well. But but I walk away from it being kind to you as someone who feels really good about what I've just done.
Oh, 100%. And actually, there is a chapter in my book about kindness because, and I get
she just
really...
plugged the book again. Here's a book, okay? She's plugging a book. It's called Know Your Own Power. But it's going to come up a few times in this episode, all right?
So the reason I'm very passionate about ideas, or I suppose we see them as concepts. I'm really passionate about we frame them as concepts like kindness and purpose and joy and our ability to comfort ourselves and imagination. All of these things and these words we've treated as a concept, and we've treated them as though they are for primary school children. Like, they're nice if you can get them. They're not really that relevant. They're a bit airy fairy. They're a bit fluffy, you know, and actually they don't really make a difference in the real world. You know, they're a bit immature. They're not things that we need to pay attention to. And I am really passionate, determined, and kind of angry in a good way, in the sense that I want to get all of these things that are so important, like connection and kindness and purpose and all these things, and I want to translate them into tangible strategies, because they are tangible, everyday wellbeing strategies and tools, and we do not use them in that fashion. So what is kindness? What does kindness look like in everyday life? What does it look like in the workplace? It's not just a fluffy kind of giving someone a hug or saying thank you or smiling. It might be that, but it might also be, you know, saying, can I take a bit of workload pressure off you? Can I do a few of those emails? You know, are you okay? What's going on for you? There are so many manifestations of kindness in day-to-day life that we just don't see and we don't use. And you're right, you know, the science tells us that kindness and purpose and imagination, you know, about kind of visualizing what our goals are, where we see ourselves, also imagination for problem solving and coming up with solutions, and things like meditation for just being still so that those solutions can come to you. And I'm not talking about meditation necessarily in the traditional form of sitting there with eyes closed. I'm talking about running or listening to music or anything that makes your mind still, allows that space for solutions to be found. And, you know, we often think, oh, there's a problem at work, I need to sit down and write a list and really think about it and really think up a solution. In my experience, if you use those kind of strategies I've been talking about, the solutions come much more easily. They're more organic, and actually they are a bit like coaching. They're already inside you. They just needed space to come out. So I'm really keen on, like you say, translating all of these things into everyday life, and imagine what a kind workplace looks like. I sometimes think we shouldn't use the word kind, because it's become associated with sort of fluffiness and soft skills and things that are just nice to have. And I sometimes think we should create a new word that actually would kind of resonate with people, would have that gravitas around it.
Well,
science.
There's a statement you can use. It's called give a fuck.
I like that. That needs to go on a hashtag on a t-shirt, maybe.
Kindness with a big line through it like
absolutely,
that. No.
absolutely. But yeah, I mean, that's what makes the world go round. That's what makes people feel valued and heard and seen. All of these things like gratitude and kindness, they're the things that make people feel well. And actually, like I said, in terms of blood pressure and pulse and your cortisol stress hormone levels, and your physical health and all of those things, they are all impacted by how we feel. And I think that's what we need to sort of translate into the workplace, to allow the science to speak for itself and to get that concept of kindness or joy or purpose and let it be associated with the science, because we need to talk in the language that people can hear. And by that, I don't mean, different languages across the world. I mean a language that audience can hear, that resonates with them, that matters to them, that means something to them, that I suppose taps into their pain points of, where they're struggling or where they're finding challenges in. I mean, I do lots of broadcasting. I've done CBeebies, which is a channel for under fives, and I've lived in a house with two puppets and sung songs about emotions. And I've also done, Radio 5 Live and BBC Breakfast, which is obviously for a very adult audience of kind of over 50s and 60s. So I'm saying the same thing in all of those programs, but I'm just using different words and I'm just using a different language. But ultimately, all the sort of wellbeing advice I give, all the tips I give, they are exactly the same, but they just need to be packaged and framed in a different language in a different way, so that people can actually see and hear them and find some resonance with them. So it's all about finding the right language and getting people to hear it, understand it, and be like, oh, okay, I get that. That matters to me. I'm going to listen to this and I'm going to do something about it.
It's interesting. We think about wellness, and then when we understand in companies, as you have something called learning and development.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning and development seems to be practical skills related to the business. So learning and development. Do you know how to do an Excel spreadsheet? No, I don't. Okay, let's teach you how to do it.
I actually don't really. I actually don't. How did you know that, Spencer? How did you know that?
Do you know how to do these functions of your job? Okay, and if you don't, we'll teach you to do them. You'd like to go into management. Well, maybe we'll put some time into your management training. But when you take learning and development, all of the things that you've just discussed fall into that category as well. It's kind of like,
100%.
let's take them as subjects that we need to learn to be good at. So meditation, as you gave an example, I'm not the guy that's going to sit on the big fat beanbag cross-legged giving it on. That's not me.
No.
But I run, and because I run, that's when I meditate.
Yes.
And you're at that moment of stillness. So how are we teaching people? What are the lessons that we're giving to people in business to say, right, let's teach you how to calm your mind. Let's teach you how to think about solving these problems with a different type of mindset.
Yes.
Let's give you some practical steps, and then let's do something called TMM. Okay, teach, monitor, measure. That's what I call it. We teach it, you monitor it, you measure it. Okay, and if your measurement of that is better than when you started, then we're improving. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
It makes absolute sense to me, and I've always wondered why it hasn't made sense to the majority of the world, to be honest with you. So I always say that I'm actually quite a simple person. A lot of the things that I say are fairly simple, but it's like we've forgotten them. And the idea that we kind of teach people how to use a spreadsheet on a computer. Yes, okay, that's practically important. But the idea that we do that, but we don't look at someone in terms of how they think. If they understand that their thoughts relate to their feelings, which relate to then their actions. If we don't teach people about or allow them to kind of sit back and say, what is my purpose? Where do I see my future? What matters to me? What values do I hold? How do I deal with moments of stress and overwhelm when I'm in work? Like, what happens to me? Do I become reactive? Do I argue? Do I get irritable? Do I withdraw? Like, all of these things, it's about knowing yourself. And until we get sort of businesses and corporations and that world to understand that that is the fundamental basis of everything, without that, you can't have an employee who works effectively or productively. But also for them, you can't have someone who is able to respond to stress and challenge and all the things that we talk about that's important for business. We're touching the surface with the sort of technical side of things. Whereas actually what's underneath that is that kind of rock, that fundamental basis of allowing them or supporting them to understand who they are And once you know that, you trust yourself, you have those life skills of managing thoughts and emotions and all of those other things that impact our everyday lives. We can't get anywhere. It's like building a house on sand. It doesn't work. So yes, we 100%. It's the same at school with children. You know, we teach them maths and we teach them fractions. Great. But what about their emotional health? What about them understanding who they are and how they interact with people and why they feel sometimes difficult feelings? Why aren't we doing that? Because it makes no sense to me whatsoever. It really doesn't. And I think this is where the business world and kind of workplace wellbeing needs to move towards 100%.
I think that when I hear you, it makes so much sense. Your frustration is why employers don't do that. So let's say I own a business. What am I looking for? Because I suppose that's the problem of the guy that sat in the position that I am at. You know, I'm the chairman of a group of companies, and so if the buck stops with me at the end of the day, okay, that's the reality. So where do I even start? You can tell me stuff, but where do I even start? How do I even know it to be true? You know, what have I got to look for? And I think a lot of the time, the people that are in a similar function to me are not necessarily looking at the people. They're probably looking at the badly done spreadsheet that you can't do.
Of course. I'm not so bad, Spencer. I'm all right.
but they're
Yes, of
focused
course.
maybe on that more.
Of
You know,
course.
reporting to shareholders. They're focused on making sure that, you know, the budgets have been kept. They're focused on making sure that the vision of the company is the correct vision. You know, we want to achieve X in 2024 or whatever it may be, rather than focused on the people. Now, when you take somebody else, I don't know, Richard Branson. Richard Branson said, you don't look after the customers. You look after the staff.
Yes.
If you've got happy staff,
Yes.
you'll have happy customers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a lot of people heard that. That was probably 10 or 15 years ago that he said that. A lot of people heard that and were like, yes, exactly, and did nothing with it. Yeah.
I know. Well, we all do that,
so
don't
it's a
we?
really good idea.
That sounds amazing. I love that idea.
Fundamentally.
Okay, so where are the KPIs that you were going to show me?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we then look at it and it's like, okay, so how do you do that? How do I learn? Because until this was brought to me and the data was brought to me, it wasn't a thing. You know, if somebody left the company and they were in an important function, it was frustrating. Okay. It was annoying. And it was like, right, can you stay until we find your replacement,
like, oh,
please?
no, here we go again.
Can you help me find your replacement? In fact, can you interview them?
Yes. Can you tell me
train
exactly
them
what
as
to
well?
do? Yeah, just before you leave. Yeah, thanks very much.
No. 3 months of training them in their new role. But it was like, it was a pain, but not often would I have been sat down and said, this is the financial cost to the business of you losing that member of staff. And let me tell you, another 40 over the last 12 months have left. 25% of your staff have left. Another 40 have left. Okay. And this is the actual cost. Because had someone said to me, this is the actual cost, I'd have gone, holy mother of God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know, when I look at this kind of stuff, for me, it's bringing that to my attention in a way that can make me as a business owner stop, okay? And just for a minute, think and say, how could I do this better? And then understanding people that do what you do and other people in this space actually form such a fundamental part of taking the business from where it is and repairing cracks, okay, that are financially crippling for businesses in many cases, and turning that business into an even better performing business without having to recruit a whole load of new people. Yes. Just by taking the people that they've got.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? That is a kind of reflection. You know how in our individual lives, when like a life crisis happens, when something really goes bad in our lives, or everything falls apart. We've kind of known, if we're being honest with ourselves, not always, but most of the time, we've kind of known it's on its way. We've kind of got warning signs. We've got a feeling in our stomachs of being like, oh, this is not great. I'm a bit uncomfortable about this, or this is not quite right. We've had time where we know deep down that something's not right, but we'll only address it when that crisis happens. So in the same way of often business leaders, they don't really want to look at it because, as you quite rightly said, they've got loads of stuff on their plate. They've got to do this, they've got to do that. They've got to kind of look at the vision of the business and, like you say, all the targets and the economics and everything else, which is really important. But what I suppose I'm trying to say is that if we're frightened about addressing something, or we deny it, or we avoid it, or we stick our head in the sand, that is frightening. You know, when fear happens for us, we don't want to look at something. But what we have to do is say to ourselves, okay, well, this is frightening to look at it. I don't really want to look at it, but it's more frightening if I don't. And that realization of, actually, I don't really want to do this, but if I don't do it, things are going to be a lot worse. In the same way, businesses, you know, they can look at the short term in terms of those things and those outcomes. But ultimately, what's more frightening is actually not addressing sort of employee well-being and not addressing these issues and not putting in the training or the resources, because, you know, that short-termism can only last for so long. And all of that stuff we've been talking about, like purpose and training and, you know, really kind of investing in employees and their well-being, that is going to be the long-term solution, the sustainability, the fact that their business is going to be able to produce that outcome for 3, 4, 5 years or decades. That's what's going to hold them together. So you have to have the element of the short term, but ultimately underlying that, much important, is the long term. And all the things we've been talking about is long-term sustainability of businesses. That's what it ultimately is. You can keep kind of a ship afloat for a little while, you know, ignoring all that, but you're not going to have your business for very long, I don't think, if you don't pay attention to, like you say, the high rates of absenteeism, of days off sick, of recruitment, of people leaving, of teams not getting on, and lack of cohesion because people are not engaging because they're not well or they're stressed. Or they're not productive, they're not doing their work. We know all of these stats, we know all these figures. And what we have to do is we have to get those figures together. We have to get the science together of why this stuff works in terms of well-being and employee well-being. And we have to then put that, if you like, in a bit of an equation and then show what it can equal and show the benefits it can equal in terms of putting the resource, the time, the training, and all of those kind of, what I would call the sort of the simple stuff. So in one of my workplaces many years ago, they suddenly decided to get rid of free tea and coffee from the kitchen. Right? So no tea bags, no coffee, no milk, no facilities to make a cup of tea. That was it. The difference that made to how people felt, not just in terms of being valued, but also that space just to get together in that kitchen and have chats and feel part of something and feel a sense of belonging. That was horrendous for that organisation, because people thought, my gosh, if you can't even be bothered to invest in a couple of tea bags to keep us vaguely happy, then why are we here? What is that about? And then people started then going out to get teas and coffees on the high street. So you then lost that sense of teamwork and people being in the building together. That's a really simple example. But you have to make your employees feel valued. And sometimes it is actually even just the very simple things that can do that, as well as all of the other stuff that we've mentioned already in our conversation.
It's interesting. Danielle, my business partner, her father was a coal miner. And when they closed the colliery, everything changed.
Yes.
Because the whole community, everything, you know, there was the social club for the coal mine, there was the football team, the rugby team, the cricket team, there was the wives, there was the women's lib and all that kind of stuff. All of these communities were built around the coal mine.
Yes.
You take the coal mine away, you take away the community, and everyone dissipates, and it brings people into, it makes people realise what they had.
Yes.
You know, where they belonged.
Yes, it's a sense of belonging.
Absolutely.
You know, because like I said, we spend so many hours of our lives at work. And ultimately, when you think about what humans need, we all have universal needs. We need to feel valued and seen and heard for who we are. We need to feel loved. We need to feel safe, you know, physically and emotionally, but also we need to feel connected and we need a sense of belonging. And these universal human needs, when they're not met or addressed or fulfilled, then behaviour becomes dysfunctional, things don't work, things break down. And actually, ultimately, all of these things we're talking about come back to those human needs. And when people are in distress, or they're not behaving that great, or they're not working very well, just to stop and think, what is it in this moment? What need is that person not having fulfilled in this moment? Because, you know, if we have an argument in our daily lives with someone we love, okay, we can often stop and say, we can either react and respond and it gets worse, or we can say, okay, there's something in you right now that isn't being met, a need that you're not having fulfilled. What is that? Is it that I'm not listening to you? I'm not looking at you because I'm on my phone? Is it because you're feeling tired and you haven't had enough sleep? Are you hungry? What is it? What is that need that is not being fulfilled in terms of why you're being upset or angry or frustrated? So again, it's down to sort of basic human psychology. How do we encourage and foster an atmosphere of belonging in a workplace? Because people want to belong, they want to feel part of something, want to feel valued. And once we get those things right, and that manifests in lots of different ways: time, attention, training, people asking them what really matters to them, people listening about maybe their caring responsibilities they've got at home. If we can do that, then people will stay and people will be happy and people will work harder. And people will go and shout about your business all over the place and they'll recommend you to other people. So it is simple, and yet we've totally forgotten about how to do that.
I remember I joined a company when I was about 24, 25. And after a year or so, they gave me equity in the company. Now, to give you an idea about how small that equity was, my dividend was £137. So it was tiny, yeah?
Yeah.
But I got it in a certificate and it was in a frame. I was unrecruitable. In an industry that poached people all the time. I was unrecruitable for 15 years thereafter. Nobody could recruit me because I was a shareholder. I had equity in the business. I belonged. It meant something.
Exactly.
The dividend wasn't worth the paper it was written on,
No.
but it was a demonstration that I was valued and I mattered. And it's interesting how something as small as that meant so much to me.
Yes.
Way more. And maybe that's something to do with my history and my life growing up. Who knows? But it meant so much to me. And then when you go back to the coal miners, you think about how much it must have meant to them. That's not a nice job.
I know.
Being a mile underground, cutting coal out. You saw the videos in the years gone by. They'd come out black, covered in soot and all kinds of stuff. It wasn't a healthy environment. But they belonged. Let's talk about leaders. When you look back over your years, who's the leader that you worked with that you have the fondest memories of, and why?
That's a good question, actually. I think it was probably someone in one of my radio roles, actually. And I think I have the fondest memories of them because they were a champion for other people. They championed other people. And I think in lots of different environments, and again, this is something that I think in the sort of the work sector in the business world is really, we need to really, really get a hold of this and get a grip of this because, so much of the chat around being successful is around pushing other people down, pushing yourself forward, your success at the expense of someone else or to the detriment of someone else. And you only be successful if you basically just shove yourself forward, you're really egotistical and you shout a lot and you make a lot of noise and you push. And I think there is this kind of idea that, or this sense of like, we can't get anywhere unless we do harm to someone else, just in terms of career prospects. It's just not right. It's not the truth. It's not how things work. I don't think it's necessarily how we want to live either. But also it sends out the message that there is only so much to go around for everybody, which is not true. So we get this sense of lack, this sense of there's not enough. We don't have that sense of abundance. Actually, there's plenty of opportunities for all kinds of people. And we don't need to do something to the detriment of someone else to be successful. And I think sometimes at work, the conversation is around competitiveness. I'm not talking about competitiveness in terms of between businesses. Absolutely, that's there and that needs to be there. I'm talking about in relationships at work and with colleagues and peers. We need to reframe actually what a good leader is. And the reason that person in that radio role I really respected and liked was because she was secure enough in herself, in her role. She knew who she was. She knew her values. She knew what mattered to her. She treated people well, everybody well, right from the top person right down to a person you might think was a lower level. She treated everyone the same, but she also championed people. She moved them forward. She gave them opportunities. She saw the potential in them. She gave them a chance basically to do what they wanted to do. And the loyalty that she encouraged in people was immense, was extraordinary. And you got rid of this atmosphere of insecurity. And as a result, everyone got on so much better. So for me, the best leaders are the leaders who champion people. and who, like I say, are secure enough in themselves to not have to push anyone else down, and who treat people, everybody, the same. So when I was in hospital, sometimes people would say to me, "Oh, Radha, you talk to the consultants, but you also talk to the porters and the nurses. You're so nice to everyone, the security guards. Why do you do that?" Someone said to me. And I said, "Why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I? Why is that even a question?" But for some people it is. And I don't get that. I just don't get any of that. And I don't respect it. And I don't like it either.
Look, I understand if someone's having a bad day.
Yeah, of course. We all have bad days.
I understand. My wife's
Yeah.
terrible when she's hangry.
So am I, actually, to be
And so I do understand some people are having a bad day, but I've never understood them. And we have probably in Dubai more of a polar opposite there than we do here in the UK. But I don't get, for me, it's the height of rudeness. And if you're prepared to talk to people that way, then you're probably not the kind of person I'd like to be friends with either.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that, you sometimes see people who are really high up in their field of work, really respected, have done incredibly, incredibly well. And you come across those golden kind of nuggets of people who they're so important, and yet they're so humble, and they're so down to earth, and they're just so lovely, and they're so kind and nice and respectful. And I just think they are the best people. And I would like to think, and I will still hold on to this hope, that actually to be successful, I think it'd be lovely to just have that around being kind and respectful to people. I don't want to believe that we live in a world where you can only become successful by pushing other people down. I hope that's not the case.
No.
I don't want it to be.
I hope so too. Okay, let's try and give some people some tips and advice right now on maybe if let's go from an employee's point of view. You work for a company and you want to feel more connected. You want to feel more engaged and involved, and you want to feel like that you should belong. What kind of approach do you think an employee could have to that? And then we'll flip it the other way around.
Yeah. So I think for the employee, you need to get honest with yourself first about who you are, what you want, why you're there, and actually what's kind of bugging you. What is making you feel like you don't belong? So you need to get really honest and reflective with yourself and answer some of those questions, because you can't expect someone else to understand or to have any idea about how to solve these if you don't know yourself. And we don't often. How often do we sit down and literally just think, okay, what am I doing in my life? Where am I going? What's happening for me? What do I really want? What's making me feel sad? We don't do that. We kind of just rush about. We kind of feel like we're not enjoying things, but we don't really interrogate ourselves as to why. So you need to get honest about that, get clear about what you want, what you're asking for. I think you also need to get honest about what your responsibility or your part has been in the sort of situation you're in at the moment. So if you're not happy, what's been your part to play in that? What has been your responsibility? It's very easy for us to blame someone else and say, oh, it's all their fault. They're doing this and they're giving me these shifts and they're not listening to me. In any relationship, any dynamic, there's always two parties and there's never one party totally to blame. So what has been your part in that? Get really clear on that. And then it's about trying to communicate that to your team, to the people who are going to help you and support you in changing this and moving this forward. So you can't avoid that. You can't avoid that conversation. You can't hide from it. You can't avoid necessarily those kind of difficult conversations. You need to be honest and tell them and communicate with them about what you want and what's possible. And then you need to come up with a kind of a plan that works for both people. You need to come up with some compromises, some understanding. There might be a period of trial and error where you try some things, they don't work, you adapt, you're flexible. Ultimately, you're not, expectations are important as well. So you can't expect everything to be 100% lovely all the time. That's just not real life. So what are you prepared to give? How much of that percentage from that 100% are you willing to accept that won't always make you happy, and to be realistic about that as well? So I think there are a few of the things there. I think also to do that, you don't just need to look at your work life. You need to look at your personal life and what's going on in that. Our personal lives, we don't leave those at home, do we? Take some of that with us to work, no matter how good we are at kind of hiding it or putting it away in a box. What is going on for you personally, what's happening in your own life. So to do a bit of a review of that, as well as your work sort of life, is also important. But also I think it's about relationships. Relationships in life are one of the main determinants of our mental health and our emotional well-being. So what are your relationships like at work? Because no matter how hard work gets or how challenging it gets, if we have meaningful relationships that we trust, then actually we'll get through that. I often say to people, it is the people at work who make it, as opposed to sometimes the work itself. So working on relationships, what are you doing in those relationships? How much time are you putting into that? Are you nurturing them? Are you going out to see people? Are you making the extra effort? What are those? It's all about relationships. And if you can get that right, I think it will help you feel a little bit better in terms of work.
Okay, good. And then from an employer's point of view, okay, you want your team to do better. You've banged the drum, you've gone in the office, you're telling everyone to crack on, we need to achieve these goals and these targets. Come on, guys, let's make it happen type of thing. You've offered a team building day up and, you've done an incentive and someone said, it'd be nice if you got a birthday cake for everyone on their birthdays. And so you now come in with a birthday cake with the candles on. And there's bowls of fruit every Monday morning in the office that last 5 minutes. And guess what? There's as many tea bags and coffee as you need.
Yeah.
What as a business owner or someone in a leadership position, what tips and advice could you give for people in that place to start on that journey of trying to understand people better and do more and be better with them?
I think it's helpful to look at it in terms of different categories or levels. So, for example, you need to look at the individual level and the team level, I think. So the team level, you're talking about cohesion or connectivity, how people are working together in terms of their roles, boundaries, roles, people knowing what they're supposed to be doing, knowing who they're supposed to be interacting with, who's doing what. Is that all working? That machinery kind of cog system I was talking about, are the kind of technical bits of that working, the logistics working of that? And then look at the relationships within that team. So how are they? Are there any conflicts, any issues, anyone's shoulders rubbing up against anyone else's? Do you need to get them together and sort that out with a bit more focus and a bit more in depth in terms of discussion with them? So looking at that kind of the team side of it. And then you need to kind of look at the individuals. What is going on with each person in that team? Personally, at work, their productivity, what have been some of the issues before, addressing some of the issues. I think sometimes when issues come up for employees, and even if they're kind of seen as historical, people remember stuff at work. They hold on to stuff. They bear grudges sometimes. They have memories of when things went badly wrong. And unless they're addressed head on, they'll always have that a little bit in the shadow, and that will still be affecting relationships and or how they work. So not being afraid to kind of dig back into the past and say, how was this? When problems start, get onto them early, get them sorted out early so they don't fester. We all know what it's like in a workplace when things fester and they linger and they get worse and worse and worse when they're not addressed. And then looking at those sort of two levels of the group and the individual, and then you want to look at sort of the two categories of working on the deficits or what's wrong with the business, but then also kind of the pluses. So then working on what is going to help people's purpose and their sense of vision and their goals. So you need to kind of look at what's not right and what you need to fill in terms of gaps and deficits, and what's kind of been maybe a source of conflict. But then looking at actually, it's not just about filling those gaps. It's about helping people thrive. What does thriving look like? What does that mean? Getting feedback from them. Sometimes employers, they assume they know what employees want. They assume they know what the problems are. That's not the case. We can't assume anything. So actually asking them specifically, what are the issues? How do you feel? What are the problems there? You need to tell me, what do you think would help? You don't necessarily need to follow that, but you need to get them to tell you, because if you're doing it from a top-down sort of structure, it's not going to work, and they're not going to engage with it either.
Very valuable points. Okay. We've plugged it already.
That wasn't me. I didn't do that.
Here we go. So, Dr. Radha wrote a book called Know Your Own Power. So let me just read a bit about it and then we'll talk about it, okay? When life throws us curveballs, it can be hard to cope. We may feel uncertain, powerless, and stuck. Discover how you can rise to even the toughest of challenges. In this inspiring book, Dr. Radha helps us reframe crisis, testing times, and unexpected change as opportunities, and teaches us how to unleash the power within us. So when life hits hard, we can withstand the upheaval. Tell me more about your book.
So I think this book was probably ready to be written for about 15 years before I wrote it. But actually I wrote it in...
Did you have a quill?
Yes, exactly. Very, very slow process it was to write. So I wrote it in the kind of Easter time of 2021. And I suppose that was because, the pandemic was kind of still kind of going on. But I think basically all of my broadcasting work, all the things I'm interested in terms of mental and emotional health, and sort of supporting people with the how-to, they'd all kind of culminated in all the stories that I've heard in my different roles. And I just thought to myself, wouldn't it be useful to create a book on kind of how to do life? And when I said to people say, what's your book about? I was like, well, it's kind of how to get through life. They're like, how many pages is that? Like, that must be a long book. So I just thought, wouldn't it be amazing to write a guidebook on like when life happens and when it gets really hard and like I say, everything falls down, falls apart around you, or you just feel a bit lost. How on earth do you navigate that, get yourself up and out of it and learn the lessons that hopefully will reduce the risk of that kind of thing happening again? Because like I say, life impacts us all. You walk around down the street today and you look at people's faces or look at what they're doing, what's going on for them at the moment, what's happening in their lives. We don't really pay attention to life events. So I wanted just to really, like I said, create a bit of a toolkit, a guide on like when everything is absolutely terrible, how do you survive that period? Because sometimes we just need to survive and we haven't got the capacity to actually do anything else, and that's fine. How do we learn the lessons from that about what our part was in that, what other people's part was, what are the kind of strategies and tools we want to learn about ourselves to get to know ourselves a bit better? And then eventually, finally, how do we then act? How do we take action to change something for the better, to live the lives that we want to live and to live authentically, I suppose, as who we are? So that was the idea behind the book.
And how long ago did you publish it?
So the hardback was out last year and the paperback has just come out about a month ago.
Did you do an audiobook?
I did, yes.
So it's on Audible?
It's on Audible, it is.
Did you enjoy the experience?
Oh, I love it. So audio is my favourite medium. I love voice. I think it's really intimate. I think it's something which you can't really get any other way, that kind of feeling of intimacy from radio or audio. And it was I've always wanted to be in a radio play. Not necessarily the Archers, but like maybe an Agatha Christie drama or something like that. And so going to do my own audiobook was just the best thing in the world. I loved it. I love using my voice like you do to just make a difference and to just do something positive. I think voice is just beautiful.
I think that with the right kind of voice that you can reach into people's souls. Okay, you can connect with them. And regardless of what happened 3 years ago, I find that a bit of a blip, if I'm honest with you, because I think that all the way through life, people struggle.
Yes.
People do, and that's with their financial challenges of having to cope with the salaries they're on, with relationship issues, with employment issues, with everyday dramas. A puncture on the motorway.
Oh, well, exactly.
Can send you into a horrible spiral, and knowing that there are people that care. And feeling that there are people that care can give you some form of comfort. And it's essentially the metaphorical example of, your mum putting her arms around you when you're a kid, okay, and kissing you on the forehead or kissing you where you grazed your knee and telling you, it's all gone now, it's going to be okay. And all of a sudden you felt comforted and calmer, and you dust yourself off and you go and live and fight another day. But as adults, we don't have that, kiss on the graze on the knee. But
no, we don't. No.
It doesn't mean we don't need it.
Oh, we 100% need it. In fact, I think adults need it even more because we have been told that because we're adults, we don't need it and we shouldn't need it and we should just get on with it. And then we're like, but I do need it. And why when everyone else seems like they don't need it, it's just me. And I think, again, the reason for that book as well was to help people feel like they're not on their own, that they're not so alone in this, because we are, like you said, we all struggle. And the pandemic really, it just highlighted the struggles. But we've had struggles every single day of our lives. And so for me, the worst thing for me, even when I was growing up, was that I never wanted anyone to be distressed, unhappy, or to feel alone with anything, because loneliness and feeling like it's only you and there's no one else there for you is the worst feeling. If you can feel like actually there are other people going through this, I've got some tips or some advice about what I could do. I've got someone telling me, like you said, voice and words, they can do a lot to help heal someone, to help hold someone in that space before they can actually feel better themselves. And just having that, I suppose, that companionship in terms of voice and words, I think is everything. And I think it's life-saving. We talk about, a few weeks ago, I went on my basic life support course in terms of physical life-saving. For me, supporting people to feel like they're not so on their own, that is life-saving, because mental health and emotional well-being, when they're bad, and kindness and being there for someone, that does save lives, and that's the truth. And we don't give it the kudos or the gravitas that it deserves, I don't think.
But there's a lot more people that kill themselves that get hit by a bus.
Yeah,
that's the truth of the matter. And I think that when you're alone, and you become a child again when you're alone.
100%.
Because the fears become big, and they become overwhelming. And only do people consider suicide when they're alone.
100%.
They don't consider suicide when they're not alone. And it doesn't matter whether you're surrounded in a room with 50 other people that know you. You being alone in your mind is a really challenging thing. Now, we're filming this in the middle of November at the moment. We've got Christmas coming. And Christmas is a really lonely time for some people, people that may have lost partners, or may be going through a divorce, or, they're elderly and their kids live in other countries and stuff like that. It can be a really lonely time. And I really feel that at Christmas. And so what I try and do every Christmas is invite people that I know to come and spend the day with us on Christmas. And that, because I know what it means to them. To have that sense of community and family and just enjoy, rather than sitting in front of the telly on your own, with a ham sandwich and feeling miserable. I wish that everybody, when it comes to a time like this, whether it's Thanksgiving in the States or Christmas right now that's coming up in the UK, if everybody was just able to be a little bit more kind and to go and find one person that they could be kind to over the Christmas period, it wouldn't take much.
It doesn't take much.
It wouldn't take much. There's a lady called Gillian who's a friend of mine in Dubai. She's in her 60s. I know she's alone. And it doesn't take much to invite her to lunch, and she's so excited. My parents are flying over, and I'm at my parents. She's like, I'm so excited to spend Christmas with you. And I know where she'd be. She'd be in her apartment on her own, putting a brave face on. Okay. And that's just,
I think this time of year, like you say, and it's made worse as well by all of the adverts of these perfect families sitting around a table with
just remind me how lonely I am.
Exactly, with loads of food and all the whole framing of Christmas, and like you say, other times of year is around, this is perfect, this is happy, this is a celebration, this is wonderful, we can't wait for Christmas, we're so excited. I think if you were to ask most people, I think, would probably say there's a lot of stress and or loneliness and or difficult, challenging emotion associated with those times of year. I think everyone, even if it's not necessarily very challenging emotions or loneliness, it's stress. And actually the whole build up to this whole kind of a momentum of how, I suppose, the shops and everyone kind of telling to buy things and get ready for it, and the whole pressure of it. It's like a pressure cooker. It's like, how do you expect people not to get stressed out and tear their hair out or fall out? Or then there's a big conversation around who's spending Christmas Day with who and who's going to travel here, there, and everywhere. And you're just like, oh, do you know what? Most people I talk to just want a peaceful day, or just a day of just, like you say, very simple, I suppose, encounters or connection. But coming onto loneliness, that is that and New Year, I think, are really, really just such pivotal times for people and for their mental health. Because again, New Year is this thing where we framed it as new year, new start, look back at the last year, what's happened, where have you got to with your life, what is life about? And those questions can be very, very difficult when you're not feeling in a good place. So I think, like you say, just thinking about other people, just getting them involved. Everyone just wants to feel loved. And I know that's simple, but if we allow people to feel loved and safe physically and emotionally, a lot of the problems in the world that we see, I don't think would be happening.
Good point. Lastly, I experienced my first real dose of understanding gratitude at Christmas. And that gratitude that I experienced was meeting people that knew how to wrap Christmas presents.
Oh, gosh. You're talking about Excel spreadsheets. Well, my wrapping's not that great either, I have to say.
I'm terrible, but when I see people who know how to wrap Christmas presents, I'm in awe. I'm so glad that you're on this planet.
I've got a friend like that. She's all about the ribbons. She does all the little creases with scissors. She presents this beautiful thing to me, and I'm there like, oh, here's a plastic bag. There's something in there, I think, for you. I hope you like it.
Dr. Radha, thank you so much for coming to join us on the show today. It's been great chatting to you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much, Spencer.